What's happening, good people? We in the building. Attorney Gerald Griggs, what's happening, my man?
What's going on, my brother? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, man. We ain't seen you in a while. Last time we saw you was on Renegade Culture. It's been
that was a while ago. That was a very interesting episode.
As he says, deadpan.
Yeah, I forgot it was a damn sure interesting episode.
Yes,
that was the Red Cup
edition right there.
He was like, why the hell am I on here with you folks?
Yeah. And who put this in my red cup? But anyway, good to see you on deck. I actually reached out to Attorney Griggs probably about an hour before showtime today. I'm like, man, we're gonna be talking about R. Kelly. Why can't we just reach out? We couldn't reach Robert Kelly, so we said, look, let's reach out to Gerald Griggs and see if he can come on board.
So he's a little busy right now, Kalonji.
Yeah, of course he's busy, man. It's all good.
Robert's a little busy now.
He's a little busy. But Gerald Griggs, Attorney Griggs, man, you were a part of this particular case. Can you give us a rundown? We haven't really discussed R. Kelly at all today. We wanted to save all the good stuff for you and get from a legal perspective. So give us a run.
Well, I've been involved in the Robert Sylvester Kelly case since about 2017. When I was hired by the Savage family to try to reunite them with their daughter, Joycelyn Savage. And then I was, after that, hired by two of the accusers of Robert Sylvester Kelly to help amplify this. And so we've been fighting since 2017 to get attention around this case. There have been 3 documentaries. We've spoken to countless members of law enforcement, and it ultimately culminated in 4 different cases against Robert Sylvester Kelly, including the Eastern District of New York, for violations of the Racketeering and the Mann Act. And so yesterday, after 4.5 weeks of trial, 50 witnesses, the jury spent about 9 hours in reviewing this case and returned a guilty verdict on all counts. And so that's what the bombshell news was yesterday. It went around the world that Robert Sylvester Kelly has been convicted of racketeering as well as violations of the Mann Act. And so, as I said before, I represent several families, several of the victims. I know a majority of the accusers. I've interviewed them, and we've gone through this case for such a long time that I'm relieved to say that the jury has believed these accusers, and now Mr. Kelly has been convicted. So now we're in the process of getting ready for his sentencing, which will take place in May of 2022. And getting ready for the other 3 cases. So that's kind of the rundown of where we are. And, I take any questions you guys have.
Yeah, can you quickly just tell people what the Mann Act is and why? So obviously, R. Kelly was sort of obviously accused of sexual assault. How does the conspiracy charges also play into that and what he was convicted of, just for the audience?
Okay, for the audience, the reason why he was charged with violation of the RICO, the Conspiracy Racketeering Act, is because the allegation was he used his fame and stardom and the enablers around him, bodyguards, managers, lawyers, and many others, to use his fame to facilitate the trafficking of young women that were underage for the purpose of sex. And the violation of the Mann Act is that he transported these underage women across state lines for an illicit purpose, the illicit purpose being sex with underage women. And so that's why you had the RICO conspiracy, and then that's why you had violations of the Mann Act. And of course, I've been listening to all of the noise on social media. I do understand the historical perspective of the uses of the Mann Act, but we also have to understand that these allegations and now proven crimes were against African Americans by an African American. So of course, I understand the historical perspective, but I also understand the extent of these allegations that have now been proven to be true.
How comfortable were you all with this with this case? I mean, I know it's been long and grueling, and you up against a man that's considered powerful in the industry. You know, what was it? I mean, did the victims? I mean, was it a determination type thing, or was it just up in the air? Or I mean, what was that experience like?
I mean, it was definitely determination, and I have to take my hats off to the survivors. They went through a lot, both in person and online, as well as the abuses that they survived. So it was a lot. Many people doubted them. Many people tried to victim shame them. Many people tried to abuse and threaten But ultimately, their resolve to see this thing all the way to its conclusion is the reason why we've reached this point. I also have to thank many of the activists, the Mute R. Kelly movement. Many African-American women were the reason for the renewed attention around this case. And then, of course, independent media that was pushing it. So, we're appreciative of all the support that we have gotten, but we are in the process of getting justice. This is just one step.
Now, you said there was, I'm sorry, go ahead. 4 cases. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
These 4 cases, does that mean that there are 3 more, or is this just?
There are 3 more. So he had the case, the conspiracy case, RICO conspiracy case in the Eastern District of New York. He currently has a obstruction of justice, child pornography case in the Northern District of Illinois. And then he has a state case, which is in Cook County. And then he has another state case in Minnesota. State case in Minnesota is allegation of child pornography. The state case in Illinois is a culmination of all of this that we've seen before. And then, of course, the big one is the Northern District of Illinois, where they're charging him for obstructing the previous trial and then violations of aggravated sexual abuse and having sexual relations with underage women. So he still faces a panoply of charges that could end with him being in prison for the rest of his life.
So you spoke already to sort of myth busting what's spoken about in social media. One of the other things that gets thrown around a lot, even come up in my own classes, has been something to the effect, why did the families let him do all of this? Where were all of the other members of the family? Why weren't they crashing through some door and busting him up? Or so given your experience obviously with the law, but also sort of intimately knowing the stories of the victims, what would you say to people who might from the outside looking in say, why didn't they just go grab their children? He's just R. Kelly. Why didn't they deal with this differently and more aggressively a long time ago?
Well, I mean, R. Kelly had enablers, many of which were in law enforcement for a very long time. So you weren't going to just run up and bust into somebody's apartment or house or studio. You would have been stopped by law enforcement many times. There were several competent threats against people's lives, which ended in 2 people now being charged for those. So I think people need to understand that this was a process, and many of the accusers had attorneys that were guiding them on the correct way to do this. Lee Merritt had a few of the cases. Gloria Allred had a few of the cases. I have a few of the cases. There were many lawyers over a substantial amount of time that had cases. Even Mr. Avenatti at some point allegedly had some cases. But it was a concerted effort to make sure that this was accomplished the correct way. I do understand that many people are saying on many platforms, if it was their child, well, it wasn't your child. And you need to make sure that you do it the appropriate way. So I would say that survivors and the families did it the appropriate way in this particular case. And I do understand the concern for many people about the documentary, but they need to understand there were 3 documentaries. It took time to get people to understand what was actually happening and then to provide information that would lead law enforcement to take an action. Because for many years, law enforcement was not going to take any action against Mr. Robert Sylvester Kelly. They were not believing the voices of the victims and survivors. So it took a concerted effort to get it that far.
I appreciate
I wanted to ask you about obviously there's still criminal charges and there are civil charges or a civil case, I guess several civil cases. Can you discuss a little bit around what are next in terms of some of the lawsuits that are going to be, some which are probably already pending, maybe some have not been filed but will be filed soon, and where is that at in terms of some of the legal work that still has to be done around holding R. Kelly responsible?
Exactly. There are currently several lawsuits that are pending. There will probably be other lawsuits that have been filed, but particularly for my clients, the focus was to hold him criminally accountable and then to reunite the Savage family with their daughter. Other lawyers have filed actions. I believe Gloria Allred has a civil action in New York. I know there's several other lawsuits pending, both in Georgia as well as in Mississippi, but we do expect that there will be others. I think what people fully need to understand that a majority of the accusers and families wanted to hold him accountable criminally. You know, I see it all the time. Many people, oh, they were in it for the money, and when the money stopped, many of the accusers were not in it for anything other than justice. And so I think that that's another myth that's floating around social media, particularly for my clients. Nobody ever requested a dime, received a dime, did anything for any amount of money. They wanted him to be held accountable. You know, and what a lot of people have to understand is there was a concerted group around Mr. Kelly that enabled this behavior for decades. And so it took these survivors having the courage to go all the way. And my hat is off to them. You know, they suffered abuses online that no one should suffer. And then they suffered physically things that still have not been outlined completely. You know, the documentary was the G-rated version of what happened. The trial got more to an R rating. There are explicit X-rated things that happen to not only young women and girls, but also boys. And so that was all brought out in court, and that will be brought out even more. There were videos, there were tape recordings, there were witnesses, 46 witnesses that testified in this case, and there are other witnesses that will testify in other cases. There was ample evidence. So when I heard people online talking about, oh, they don't have any evidence, oh, it's a he say, she say, no, it was a he say, the evidence say, the DNA says, the tape says, his admissions say, all of this happened, and that was proven in a court of law and will be proven again.
Man, I appreciate you taking on such a bold case and a bold stance. And I agree with you on the victim tip because of the fact that so oftentimes people are afraid to come forward because of the fact that they don't want to go through all the bullshit that comes with it. So definitely hats off to you on that. One of the things you mentioned that was important as well, you said that he was protected by law enforcement. You know what I'm saying? Now, are these like hired off-duty cops that you're saying that he had security, or what was the situation with that?
Well, from the testimony, and again, I'm going to focus on what's publicly available. From the testimony, he had in his defense a former Chicago police officer who testified that R. Kelly hired private security, many of which were part of Chicago police. So that's what's publicly available. Of course, we know of other instances and allegations that will probably come forward in the trial that will show that he had significant help from law enforcement.
Has the Savages been reunited with their daughter, or what's the situation with that?
Not yet. We've had occasion to speak with her on several occasions over the phone. They've spoken with her directly in person once, but they have not had a consistent sit down engagement of their daughter. That's what they're seeking. Now that Mr. Kelly has been arrested and now convicted, we are seeking to reunite with her permanently and to establish a line of communication that rebuilds that familial relationship. So we're in the process of doing that. We will continue to do that. That's been their goal from the very beginning, to reunite with their daughter and to make sure that Mr. Kelly was held accountable.
Just two quick questions. One, I'm not sure if you've answered or if I missed it, but all the people that you've said enabled Kelly, are any of them going to be charged? Can there be charges even if you're under his employ? I'm assuming that legally that doesn't protect you from illegal activity or from, you know, protecting him in illegal activity. And then the other question I have is he still going to be able to earn money off of his music sales going forward? Does any of that get interrupted by any of the charges that have come or might come?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. Thank you for those questions. First and foremost, everyone that enabled his behavior can be charged. Now, that's a decision that will be made by federal prosecutors and state prosecutors. 3 have already been charged. We fully expect that others will be charged. There was a lot of conversation online about how can he be in a RICO conspiracy by himself. He was never in a RICO conspiracy by himself. There were unindicted co-conspirators. Those unindicted co-conspirators can be indicted. Some of them cooperated and testified. Some of them did not. So we fully expect that other criminal proceedings will take place, including the 3 that have already been indicted. Your second question about him continuing to earn financial compensation from his music. My understanding is he does not own his masters. And so we think that other entities are profiting off of Mr. Kelly. That's a decision that those entities have to make about whether or not they're going to continue to fund this type of behavior, but they could potentially open themselves up to civil and criminal liability as well. This is still a process. Yesterday was the beginning of the end of this journey. It's not the end. So we fully expect that entities that help to enable this type of conduct will be held accountable. That is part of the wishes of many of the survivors, of course, the wishes of many of my clients. And so we're hopeful. But the short answer is it's up to law enforcement, who else they're going to charge, who else they're going to take to trial. We provided substantial evidence of numerous enablers. And so I believe they face civil and criminal liability that they should be concerned about.
My bad. Just real quick. Sorry, Kalon. Just to follow up. Did I hear you correctly that if those who own the masters to his music continue to sell and profit from it, that they could somehow be seen as being culpable in promoting his behavior? Is that did I hear you correctly?
What I'm saying is this. Since he's been in custody, he's not been able to continue the criminal conduct that we know of. Prior to that, there were entities that were funding all of the lavish lifestyle, all of the ability to transport women and to fly women out. All of that conduct under the government's theory is enabling a criminal conspiracy. So each member of the conspiracy can be held accountable for the underlying activity of the conspiracy. So if he was convicted of RICO, every actor that took a substantial step during the completion of that purpose can be criminally and civilly liable. I'm not saying they're going to act on it, but there's a legal theory upon which they can.
So I think one interjection would be like, these are corporations. So whether or not they'll be held criminally liable, I think is maybe probably will not happen.
Yeah, probably won't.
And whether or not, but these, R. Kelly will have some resources. The question becomes, like in New York State, you had certain laws, I believe the Son of Sam law, which would stop anybody from so-called profiting off of any sort of act that they were convicted of in terms of any resources because they wrote a book or something like that. Now, obviously, many of these songs were written or produced prior to a conviction, but whether or not, again, an argument can be made, and again, he wasn't convicted in New York State law, but whether or not an argument can be made that the continual sale and any resources that he gets his share of, right, because of the record sales, should that be taken away from him and applied to victims? And again, you have the civil lawsuits, which will probably not only hit R. Kelly, but again, might potentially hit some of these record companies because of their continued profiteering off of music and so forth, which again, the claim could be that helped support him in his activities well after these companies knew that was happening. So I think all that stuff is still left on the table.
Yes, exactly.
So do you, as part of his legal team, as part of the victim's legal team, do you feel that the whole Aliyah marriage, was that a big factor in the case, or what was the situation with that? Because of course we have our outside viewing in type situation. How did that work out?
It was a big part of making out the RICO conspiracy. And I think it was a big part of proving the enabling conduct that occurred over a substantial amount of time. It was very difficult listening to that evidence and learning about that during the course of this investigation, because ultimately, if people had stepped up back then, you would not have had the number of victims now. So it's very difficult. I was a fan of Aliyah. And still am very concerned about the things that I learned, which now much of is publicly available. But, I think it played a role in showing the pattern and practice of Mr. Robert Sylvester Kelly.
Right on, man. Definitely appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy. I know you got a ton of interviews coming on, but you know, we hit you up last minute. I want to definitely salute you an hour and a half before. And you know, you didn't make a bunch of excuses. Oh, you know, I gotta go talk to Oprah and all these other people, whatever. You asked me what time and where it's at. So we definitely anytime you got anything going on, Black Power Media is a platform that you can use. So definitely you know, check in with us, man. Keep us posted on anything happening. And I want to point out too that Gerald Griggs is he's not a quote unquote entertainment attorney. He's a brother that we know out here in the Atlanta area that whose main work is around police terrorism. You know what I mean? So that's the main gist of it. So it's not a situation where he just, you know, here's something, let's hit this lick. This is someone who we've been in the streets on numerous occasions or whatever, dealing with this whole issue of police terrorism here in the Atlanta area. So definitely salute to you for your continued work, brother.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me on the platform. Kalonji, when you hit me up, you know, we've known each other a long time. So I wanted to support the platform. Proud to see the growth that you guys are having. And anytime that I can be of any assistance on any of these issues, just let me know and I will continue to support the show. So thank you for allowing me on the platform. And like you said, you know, I mainly deal in issues of civil rights, especially around police brutality and police violence. So that's my main focus with regard to child sex trafficking. The victims came to me and I saw there was a problem and I knew we needed to act. And I was honored to be a part of the legal team. We will continue to push forward for justice. So thank you guys for having me on the platform.
Definitely appreciate you, brother. Stay on point. We'll be talking to you soon.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Checking out the RemiX Morning Show. That was attorney Gerald Griggs. Man, that was hard, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking again, you know, just how important it is to have attorneys doing this kind of work. You know, we need, you know, all different trades in the struggle, and that's definitely one. So it's always good to see that yet another one. And then it also seems relevant that given what we were hearing here, his work with police terrorism seems perfectly relevant for his work with this case, since they seem as much involved in protecting that operation as they seem to always often pop up when things like this are going on, you know.
I mean, I just think the use of the RICO statute was such, you know, taking the fact that he should have been convicted years ago, that it took the RICO statute, which was obviously is something that people have talked about is, you know, particularly as it applies to our political folks, has been misused. But it's interesting how the statute was applied in this particular case, because essentially, you know, you're talking about, I think Kalonji brought this up, you're talking about people who were employed by R. Kelly, basically, and some of them in their minds, you know, thought they were doing their job, right? Or some of them in their minds maybe even felt like they had no choice. But it becomes obvious when you are faced with a choice, when someone is telling you to do something which you may have some doubts about, and you're just thinking about keeping your job, you should lose your job. Because if someone is asking you to make sure some women get to my hotel at such and such and such an hour or such and such a time, and that's part of your job, or to make sure that I can sneak that person out and the media don't know, and you think that's part of your job, you should think two or three times about what your real job is, because you know, these things lead to things, and you think this is some experience that you may climb in a ladder, but you may be sending yourself to jail. So,
hey man, we're gonna spin out real quick and come back. You know what I'm saying? You're checking out the RemiX Morning Show. Happy born date, Dr. Jared Ball. We'll be right back in a few ticks.
RemiX.